Thank you all very much for being here. We're honored and grateful to have you all with us. My name is Fayrouz Abu Ghazaleh, and I'm the Director of Statewide Programs at Illinois Humanities. And I have the privilege of moderating this session, which is called Documenting Life in the Confluence Region, Past and Present. It will consist of 4 presentations, and there will be an opportunity for discussion after each one. Our first presentation is titled Reporting on Rural America at the Confluence. It features Professors Molly Parker-Stevens and Julia Rendleman of Southern Illinois University Carbondale, as well as student journalists. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Your names? Because I don't have your names. They will? Okay, fantastic. Okay. And they're participating in the university's Saluki Local Reporting Lab and have contributed to Reporting on Rural America series. Molly has worked for numerous news outlets across the Midwest and South and currently reports for Capital News Illinois and for ProRepublica through its local reporting network. Julia is a prolific freelance photographer whose works have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. She regularly contributes to the Helsingin, is that correct?
Close enough, yeah.
Sanomat, Finland's largest newspaper. Please welcome Julia, Molly, and the students, and I'll turn it over to you. Okay. And then I'll give you questions.
Hi, thanks for having us today. We're excited to be here. So a little background, my name is Julia Rendleman, photojournalist from very far away, Makanda, Illinois. I spent 20 years away from here, home, in South Louisiana, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and in Richmond, Virginia, before I came home in 2021 to start teaching these wonderful students and work on stories closer to home. I'll let Molly introduce herself.
Okay. I'm Molly Parker, and I also am from this region. I grew up about an hour from here in Simpson, Illinois, tiny little town. And yeah, I got a couple Simpsons in the house actually, and Don knows where it is, so hey, yeah, usually when I say that, people look at me funny. I moved off after graduating from SIU Carbondale and came back about a decade ago, and right when I came back, I thought, this will be a little bit of a break, a little easy breezy, but I ended up finding that there was much to report in Southern Illinois, and a lot of that reporting brought me right here to beautiful Cairo, Illinois, where I met many wonderful people in covering a lot of news in this town that many people are familiar with, but we wanted to do more going forward, other types of news in Cairo, and we're going to talk about that. So, all right, now we're going to introduce you to our fabulous students.
Hi, my name is Lylee Gibbs. I'm a third-year journalism student from DuQuoin, Illinois, so also from the region, and I'm the editor-in-chief of our student newspaper on campus.
My name is Deangelo Handley. I'm born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, from the west side of Chicago, the Austin area. I'm a staff photographer at the Daily Egyptian.
And what high school did you go to?
I went to Michelle Clark Magnetic High School.
Hi, my name is Dominique Martinez-Powell. I am the student managing editor at the Daily Egyptian. I kind of grew up all over the state, so I was in Chicago, and then Carbondale, and then Springfield, and back to Carbondale.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So, some background. I kind of conned Molly. We're very lucky to have her at SIU. When she first started, I'd only been there a year, and we knew we wanted to start tackling stories together. I'm, photojournalist primarily, and Molly's an investigative reporter. So we met in Morris Library, and we started thinking, how could we tell these stories that matter in our region, but that could have state impact that legislators would look at and hopefully, move the needle. And then how can we incorporate students? And so we came up with the Saluki Local Reporting Lab, which we were able to get some funding for. Just like Don, if you know of anyone else who has funding to give, we were also interested in additional funding. So I think Molly was going to talk about some of the goals.
So we started this lab really to think about how to tackle underreported issues, to investigate role policy initiatives, to think about the ways we're more alike in our struggles than different across this broad region. I really kind of like to call it the lower 7. Like I said, I grew up in Simpson, and I think really when you get past kind of Carbondale, and particularly sort of Anna, like a lot of, we've lost a lot of economy and a lot of people, and I think that there's power in everybody coming together and telling these stories about this region. And I also thought a lot about, I did a lot of reporting here. I started coming down over a housing crisis, but then got to know the community and got to know like that was one piece of things going on, but there was so many other issues and community to celebrate as well, history here. But I tend to do these stories that are really long and really big, and they take a lot of time. And I think part of the thing with the lab that we also wanted to talk about is like, how do we help? It's not the full solution, but how do we help tell more regular community stories in between that paints a bigger and broader picture in between these like longer, more investigative or enterprise stories. And that's where we wanted to incorporate students as well to work with us so that we could cover more ground. Just a little word about some of the places our stories have landed, both the work that I do with Julia as well as with our students. Sometimes together, sometimes separately, but we've been published by, of course, Capital News Illinois and the ProPublica Local Reporting Network, which I'm a part of, and my editor, Sarah Bluestein, is here to support us all the way from New Jersey. So she came here to see this, and I just really appreciate that. We've also had funding for the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, Urban Voices, which is this amazing newspaper that you all are seeing now in your community. That I think is just like one of the big answers to, I'm so glad that he is here, that Lloyd is here providing local news, and we're also trying to work with him, and he's run some of our student stories. Of course, the Daily Egyptian and the Gateway Journalism Review, which is part of SIU Carbondale.
Part of this, of course, is getting our photojournalist students involved in long-term storytelling. And for me, in my practice as a journalist, it's a slow thing. I want to know the community. I want to be a part of it. I want some people to recognize me, and I want to teach that to my students, the importance of being present. And so some pictures you're seeing up here are, this is Dominique, and I'll pass it to her to talk about the experience with Molly moderating an NAACP event right here in this very room. We've donated our time photographing the Jazz Festival and the Magnolia Festival, and all three, but Deangelo and Dominique, if you wanted to talk about that real quick.
About the Blues Festival?
Yeah, or the NAACP, just being in the community.
So for the NAACP moderation that we did, I believe we came and was listening to community issues, which led us to trying to figure out what kind of stories are to be told out here, because we're from Southern Illinois, but we're not from down here. And I think it was one of the first things that really got us integrated into the community right as we were starting off the lab in order to get to know community members, what their issues were, the concerns that they had. I know that Lylee was following somebody for a childcare story, and we heard about the 3D houses that were out here and a couple of other things as well. So it was just a really good introduction into what we were getting into, and everyone has always been really friendly out here and really open to allowing us to explore the space.
Yes, so I'm very much new to Cairo. This is my second time here. My first experience was over the fall semester back in September. Julia decided to take us to the Blue Festival that was happening here at Cairo, and I had no thoughts about it. Wasn't sure what was happening. I didn't even know what the Blue Festival was until I showed up, and it was just, African Americans coming together to, hang out, to just spend time with one another. It's just a loving community. And where I'm from, being in the urban area growing up, we was often, coming together to be able to just hang out as kids and adults. But, as gun violence started to spread throughout Chicago, we just don't really come together. And so coming to the Blue Festival was it felt like I was a kid all over again being there, because it was such a loving community, and everyone was just welcoming and just hanging out and having fun. And so that was an amazing experience for me.
So we want to talk a little bit about when we started the lab and when we were sitting at Morris Library. Like I said, we were like, what do we want to focus on first? And we did decide to center our reporting in Alexander County. First, I felt like I had some unfinished business here. I'd done a lot of stories again about the housing, and not all of them were pleasant, right? Like a lot of that was important and had to be told, those stories, but I felt like there was more to do, and that I didn't feel like, to be frank, that I had given the community justice in terms of like covering the full scope of the community. Not that we can ever do that fully, but it just felt like this community in this region needed a lot more attention. Like I said, I really look at these like 7 counties as people forget that there is like Illinois south of Carbondale. So it was just really important for us to look at this. We do talk a lot about framing, especially when we're working with our national partners, and why here, why now. And we had a recent census count where the Wall Street Journal had reported that this county had lost a greater percentage of its people than any other county in America. And so that kind of gave us like a reason to sort of sell these stories to our partners. And even though, that is true, that's just a frame, because it has lost a great percentage of people through no fault of the people living here. It's not like people are leaving because they want to. In many cases, it was because they had to, because the housing was lost. We've had people like from East Cape Girardeau, basically that whole community is gone because of flooding. There's just been a number of reasons why people have been leaving. But that problem of how to keep communities alive when people are leaving is not unique here, right? Like this is happening across America in rural communities that are struggling. And so we were sort of framing these discussions here, but saying this is just one community struggle, but these policies that we're exploring, housing, access to food, roads, economic development, this is across our region and many other spaces in America that are having these problems and trying to figure out how to maintain.
We have some other points up here that I don't need to read them. You guys can read them, and you live here and know these things. So let's see. Yeah, so like Molly said, we felt that Alexander County represented issues that are important to all Americans. Like everyone who's been up here has said, and Don told us on the tour, like Cairo is an important historical town, and we can the lessons we learn here can be applied to other places. So this is how I see the role of our photojournalist here, right? And you guys know this. And you guys also know, because this is your home, how hurtful it is when you open Google and you put in Cairo, Illinois, and it pops up that it's a ghost town, right? It doesn't look like one to me, you know what I mean? And that's what these pictures are here to illustrate, and that's why we wanted to be in the community. These are all photos that my students took various events and while they're working on stories down here. So the visual documentation works to counteract harmful narratives. Here's one of the first stories that the lab did, and Lylee Gibbs worked on that, so I'll pass it to her.
This was one of the first stories, I think, that we started last January when Molly and Julia came to us and put the lab together. And so we had heard of this proposal or this plan by the state that they had this ambitious plan that they were going to end poverty completely by 2026, or cut it in half by 2026, and then eventually later on completely eliminate it. And I mean, through this reporting and countless of other stories I think all of us have done, I feel like I've heard multiple times from people down in this region that like when the state proposes something that they might not always be thinking about what's going on down here. So it's a huge state, and we've got a lot of population between here and Chicago, and so I think our main goal was to examine this commission and what it was proposing and how is that going to benefit the people that live here and the people that live in Southern Illinois. And at the time of reporting, 7 of the commission seats were vacant. A lot of people here didn't know about it at all, and though I think it had even been over a year since it was proposed, what progress had been made. And so myself, Molly, Julia, another student who's now graduated, we all examined this and looked into it, and then some other things that kind of just went into this reporting was how are other people stepping up? So like Aeroleaf, for example, before they had built their permanent food pantry, they were driving a bus down here every Wednesday to just kind of help the people in the region. And so just kind of looking at that commission and how was it helping and what was it doing for the people down here that weren't really seeing the results from it.
So we also spent a long time, of course, writing about the grocery store that opened in Cairo, and that was, 2 summers ago now, is that right? Yeah, I remember being here for the opening, and this particular moment that Julia captured in this photo was truly a happy moment. For everyone here to see this grocery store, the Cairo had been without one for 7 years. That story is well told. And it's not that there isn't enough people in this town to support a grocery store. There absolutely is. There are some misnomers out there about why grocery stores don't make it in certain places, and it's not because there's not enough population to draw from. It really becomes about some things that, again, are global, are not just particular to Cairo. And we wanted to be very careful to tell the story and put it into context. So the store opening was a very bright moment. It did struggle, we know this, and unfortunately, has at least temporarily closed, although I know there are also efforts to reopen something else there. But when we were returning, even just 6 months after this, again, very great moment of seeing this open, we could see the store struggling, and we're talking to people about why. And there are a lot of reasons, we're not here to litigate some of the struggles, but there are some things that are happening globally that make it really hard to have independent grocery stores. And that's what we wanted to put into context, that places like Walmart's and your Dollar Generals have access to buy products at cheaper prices that are not accessible to independent grocers like co-ops or other independently owned stores. And we found a law on the books actually called the Robinson-Patman Act that hasn't been enforced for 40 years, but it's the law of the land, and it was supposed to allow independent grocers to have equal access to the same prices that the big corporations get. And so that was super fascinating to me to learn that within 30 miles of here, you've got 6 Walmarts and you've got a dozen Dollar Generals, and that's, where people are spending their money. And it's not because they don't want to support local. As we all know, you can't go to the grocery store and you sneeze and you walk out with $100 out of your pocket and 2 cartons of eggs. It's crazy. And so people are doing what they have to do, but some of this is by design as to why why communities are struggling to maintain their independent grocery stores.
And I'll just add again that element of time, right? So we spent 1 year frequenting, coming down, going to the grocery store, talking to people. I'll just go back and you can see some of these photos, like Miss Teresa, I followed her on her shopping, and then while she prepared the food, and through those frequent visits with the students too, we were able to see that it was more than just a grocery store, right? Or it is more than a grocery store. By the way, I think it's Monday through Fridays, 11 to 1, the deli is open, and they're selling sandwiches. Little plug. But they provided so much more, right? What grocery store lets the food pantry open up in the parking lot? That's community focused. And your Dollar General and your Walmart are never gonna do that, right? Because they're not here, they're not invested here in this community. So we wanted to document that too with our photography. It's more than a grocery store. And they have nice clean bathrooms that I use many times. Oh, and Stephen Tarver here in this photo. Okay, I'll talk about, Simeon couldn't be with us here today, but he's a recent graduate of the program. The Pulitzer Center is a partner of ours. They're based in DC, but they support underreported stories, and they support student journalists at SIU. And through a grant that they provided for Simeon, he was able to follow the Pilots basketball team for an entire season, and this is just some of the work he did. And just to point out, this is important community storytelling too. There's no there. This is just a good story about hope that the basketball team brings to these two, Demarion and Kevin, who are graduating seniors, and maybe some of you know. I'll just go through these pictures here. Simeon was able to travel with them to Indianapolis for Pacers. Is that okay? I'm not good at basketball. And then I think that was Damarion there is, I think, actually operating a car wash business here in Carbondale, so another plug for if you have a dirty car. Another story by Lylee Gibbs.
When we've been doing these stories, and we talked about the grocery store and poverty mission and the basketball team, but I mean, we're also looking at agriculture and just kind of how that innovation is, right here in Alexander County. Like, how many of you knew that there's a rice farmer just 15 minutes up the road? Okay, two of you guys. It's something I didn't know when we started, and we've really invested in that story. And for the last year, I think since this time last year, we've been reporting on how Blake Gerard, who's a rice farmer just here in Alexander County, his family started here in Cairo with row crops, and then they moved to McClure. And when the flood waters of the river became too much, he had to find something else because, time and time again, he just wasn't able to grow a crop that was going to survive. And so he was young and ambitious at the time and just decided, hey, I'm going to grow rice, and just kind of ran with it. And it's taken, well, we've found 25 years to come to a point that it's efficient. He's doing it every season. And so I worked on this with Molly and Julia, and we've gone down time and time again to see, like, what kind of is the state offering any help for people that might grow on the river, such as Cairo. And I think he grows some fields here too as well. And so just kind of reporting on that and that agriculture aspect. Anything about Blake?
No, I think we're okay. We're just kind of going through these quickly. I realize there's a lot to each of these issues, and we have 5 minutes remaining. So we also spend a lot of time reporting on childcare. That's an issue that we know really well because we have 2 littles each. And, it's just very difficult to find childcare in our region. This particular place that we featured was in Anna. Like I said, we started our reporting in Alexander County, but really see this whole region as one cohesive region, and just found, you can see these statistics on your own here, but 4,300 licensed childcare providers were lost across Illinois in the last decade, and Southern Illinois proportionally lost the greatest share. Obviously a fewer number, but the greatest share on a per population basis, and that 70% of Illinoisans in rural Illinois live in a childcare desert. So we wanted to highlight what that looked like. We can kind of scan a little faster.
Okay, go faster. 5 minutes. Okay, so here's some pictures of Heather and Steve, who run the daycare facility where people from Alexander County send their children, people from Pulaski. Steve has a terminal illness, so Heather also takes care of him. So there was a lot to this story. Do you want to talk about
Just, they risk a lot. Hopefully you guys can look at the story at ProPublica and Capital News Illinois, but they borrowed about $600,000 of their own money. And what we found, and then they lost a lot of money, and they have just now filled the daycare. And, Heather in particular, she was working like 12 hours a day. It's just like a passion project for her, because she herself had been a mom who also struggled, had to give up work, had to drive her kids 30 miles away. So for her, it really is a calling to provide this service. And we know a lot of parents have talked to many along the way who were like, I don't have options. And they found Al, and they're like, if it closes, because they were worried they weren't going to be able to keep it open. By the grace of God here, it's still going, but really felt like if it were to close, they were going to lose their ability to work, go to school, and build their lives up. Okay, and we are kind of going fast, sorry about that, but the last story we wanted to talk about that Julia and I, with a student who's not here today, Ethan, published earlier this year. We also spent about a year on, that he took the lead on. A really emotional story, and again, would just encourage you to read it, but some of you may know JR from here, and he is serving a life sentence related to a tragic, there's some dispute about what happened, but a robbery of the D&M Quick Stop. He was with his cousin, who was also implicated and had pulled the trigger, but he was also sentenced under what's accountability theory, meaning he was accused of being an accomplice to the crime. But even at the time, he got the same sentence as his cousin, who actually, admitted to the murders. But even at the time when they was sentencing him, the judge said, you know, I think that you should serve time, but I think it's an injustice that you're sentenced to the exact same thing as your cousin. But that's the way Illinois law was. The judge had no ability to provide a different sentence than life without the possibility of parole. And so there's some legislative efforts to change that. There's actually a bill this session. It's stalled right now. It, in a very rare vote, failed in the House. It failed to get enough Democrats to come on board, but they are going to try to call it again. And I know Lynn Chambers was here and said, yeah, there's a rally on Monday for JR, but they're also trying to, I think, bring up support for that bill again, because if it were to pass, so Illinois has recognized that these life sentences for offenders under the age of 21 are unconstitutional, and they've no longer allow these sentences. So if the same thing had happened today, JR would not be given life without parole, but that bill was not, that law was not retroactive. So he wasn't covered. So there's an effort to make that law retroactive, but it's stalled. And so we visited him a couple times. Ethan went once and Julia and I went once. And it's a really heartbreaking story. And I still talk to JR about once a week, so.
Just up here on the board are some things we're considering looking at. The Port of Cairo, environment and climate change, access to education, farm and ag policy, building off that story we've already been working on with Blake, rural health and aging, and I know we're running out of time, but we're of course here to know what stories matter to you. Is there something you think the lab should look into? How can we collaborate? Thank you for having us.
Can we do a question real quick? Do you mind putting your presentation in so we can... Sorry. Thank you. No question. Thank you so much. This was very inspiring.
Blake's rice is for sale. It's the Cahokia brand. It's a very good brand. It is in local markets. It's in local markets in Missouri, and as far as up north to St. Louis.
Thank you all so much.
Any question? Yeah.
I had one comment. So on the last slide, it said the Delta Regional Authority. Legacy training, we were fortunate enough we have that grant. So if you guys want any information, we would love to talk, because it's great.
Okay, great.